Penseus, a Penelope Odysseus story written and read by Hio Hino. The final chapter, chapter 3. The island felt alive as the two kids, both suspecting each other's names but neither acknowledging that, retraced the girl's step back towards the harbor. The winds made the grass dance, the birds seemed to be playing games, flying against it, working so hard to remain in place and then turning around to let the winds carry them, racing across the sky. Down in the valley on the main road, the wind was almost non-existent. Helios's rays had since stopped being scorching, now radiating a pleasant heat over them. All around them, insects buzzed over flowers, both vibrant and hidden. In that easy atmosphere, the girl, who might be a princess, asked the boy, who probably was a prince, a question, interested in how he might answer. So, you seem well informed about the happenings of this island. What can you tell me about the fire and the all but official abdication of King Laertes? The boy looked pensive for a moment, carefully contemplating his words. I once talked to the king. Was about 2 years ago in the aftermath of a boar hunt. Me and two of my friends had come along for the experience, and while the rest of the group of more experienced hunters were staking another part of the forest out, where it was rumored the boar was located, we were placing snares and looking out towards smaller prey. It was an excuse for the men to do whatever men do at those events, while we could hang out, the three of us. Spartan fondly rolled her eyes. Great, another boar hunt story. She hadn't heard that one before. But she didn't interrupt him as he continued. After I had tied a rope to the base of a tree, we heard rustling in the underbrush, and when we looked in its direction, a boar came charging toward me. The only thing between us, some shrubs and that rope. I ducked towards the side, the rope still in hand, and when it charged through the place I had been standing, its hoof caught on the rope. When it came to a stand, and I was all that it was looking at one of my friends, Polites, I threw my end of the rope towards the other, Eurylochus, so that it was once again between the ball and its target. I called him to not pull taut, as Polites dodged, and once again its leg got caught, but the loose rope didn't seem to hinder it. This continued as we slowly built a snare around the ball, and when it had we used the rope up, it was charging towards me again, and I had the end of the rope. I pulled, making the ball trip, but as it did, the rope snapped, making the ball fall on top of me, one of its ducks grazing my leg. But as I laid there underneath the oddly dazed ball, I was able to pull a knife, cutting its throat, while my friends were able to strike it on all the places, killing it. After we had been able to get it off me, my friends headed out to find the hunters, while I caught my bearings and made some discoveries about myself and the world and my place in it. The girl frowned at that. Not only was an injured boy who had to have been around 13 at the time, but also how he spoke the last part. Early in that conversation, she had thought she could understand what he said when he was being crypted. But this, she had no idea what he was getting at. After a bit, both my father and the king came rushing, and while my father was checking my injuries, the king said something to me. He said that my friends had described me as a strategist and a leader, and then proceeded to warn me. According to him, the rulers of Ithaca tend to break them. The unique circumstances of the island, making it inaccessible due to the storms or the winds blowing the wrong way, and because of that, we have to rely on unpredictable trading shipments. This made so that our leaders have to make difficult calls. What of our goods do we put on a ship, with the risk of the ships being delayed and the men not making it back in time to help with the harvest, making families miss their sons for months? What do we trade for? Not coins or gold. What good are those on an island you can't get off and others can't reach you? Do you tell ships to trade for food in anticipation for the bad harvest, or just to supplement the sheep and pig meat and the few crops we can grow? Do we you ask for building supplies, fearing the damage of a storm which hasn't occurred yet? They can afford to make a few mistakes, but if they calculate wrong a bit too often, then a lot of people are suddenly without a house. Or we are forced to eat more sheep than anticipated, waiting for a shipment of grain which might never come, leaving the island with a diminished livestock population for years to come, which means less wool, which means less opportunity for trading, which could spell disaster. And what happens if Ithaca gets caught up in a war? What if we have to send away 300 men to aid allies? That's a third of our population. Not of our men, our entire population. Women, children, and elderly included. We can't miss them, and sure, a couple of the surrounding islands may pay tribute to us and would contribute some men, but they have the same issues as us. If they decided that we were treating them unfairly and would start an uprising or decide to invade us, we wouldn't have the means to win that. But if we didn't take them in, if we didn't go to war when called, we wouldn't have any allies left. We would be left to fend on our own, and within a generation or two, it wouldn't be a kingdom no more. Maybe someone would anger the gods. Maybe the gods would anger each other, destroying Ithaca in the process. And without allies, it would crumble. Faced with starvation and no protection against raids, this kingdom will become a couple of farms surrounded by a lot of ruins. That pressure and anxiety of whether you've made the right decision, always present, always lingering and clinging to a ruler's mind, breaks them, King Latus explained to me. Ithaca has to toe the line between being a reliable trading partner but not an ally in war. If stories go out of the gods that the gods would gift us with strategies, they would come calling for us, offering us aid in return that we couldn't refuse, or repercussions we wouldn't be able to survive. This isn't Sparta, with its two kings and constant fighting. Any war, regardless of who would win, could kill this entire island. As the boy talked, they left the forest, surrounding the mountain, and entered the plain on which the city and harbor stood. The girl noticed how large the city was in comparison to the small amount of farmland surrounding it. It certainly wasn't as big as Sparta, but Sparta had countless smaller farming communities surrounding it. What she was seeing was truly the amount of agriculture they had. It almost didn't matter how many sheep they had, they wouldn't be able to feed themselves. Ithaca, under the King Latus and his predecessors, had grown too big to sustain itself. It seemed to be weighing on his mind, but he seemed to enjoy talking in circles, so she prompted him. So, King Latus gave you a talk about the pressures of leadership. Dobbs asked you not to make a name for yourself. How did your father react to that? His head turned to look at her, an unreadable look in his eyes. Well, my father and the king have always been quite close, and he knew how the king feels. He, even though he is a leader, is one in an area where he can be less involved. Spends his time playing tricks on others, both his equals and betters. On all its subjects. He is quite disliked among his victims. Maybe that is why people distrust me. Maybe they think I will give them a cause to hate me. The boy finished on a jovial tone. The girl didn't exactly understand what he was hinting at, but he seemed to be having a grand time, and for some reason that pleased her, so she let it go. When they reached the harbor, the boy noticed that the queen was standing in front of a docking ship, the Sophia, and when she moved to greet him, the boy made a gesture and the woman halted. They approached, bowing briefly before the queen, and then the boy introduced. Oh, Anticlia, Queen of Ithaca, may I introduce you to a girl who I presume is Princess Penelope of Sparta. And may I ask you to gracefully grant her a bed to sleep in for the remainder of her stay with us? The queen sent a reprimanding look towards the boy, but before she could say anything, Penelope spoke up. Queen Anticlia, I apologize for the odd way this boy, who I presume is your son Odysseus, introduced me. Since we met this afternoon, we have been obtuse about our own and the other's identity. I am in need of shelter for the foreseeable future, as I left Sparta without having had the opportunity to plan for accommodation. However, I understand that you yourself have trouble on that front. I will understand if you aren't able to shelter me. The queen looked amused. It is not often that my son meets someone able not only to understand but even willing to participate in his style of conversation. You have my thanks for that. As for the topic of housing, you are in luck. You arrived today, as my son and I are planning to sleep on the Sophia for the foreseeable future. As its crew will be staying in their homes, we should have all have more than enough room. Especially seeing as I don't think my husband will be joining us. He seems far too happy to sleep with the goats, who I think deserve their own space. Alas, he seems to think he is one of them, and thus sees no issue. And so, over the following days, Penelope resided on the Sophia, helping out on the island and getting to know it and its culture, while still finding the time to work on a tapestry, which she, as she did for all her works, didn't show anyone until it was done, much to the dismay of Odysseus. And when, sooner than expected, but taking longer than they could have, a ship arrived to take Penelope back, she left on good terms, taking a nearly finished tapestry with her. About 2 years later, when the now King Odysseus travelled to Sparta, officially to court Helen, unofficially to stop a war from breaking out and just for himself, to see Penelope again, the now two 17-year-olds rediscovered the compatibility they had at first felt under an olive tree. After a prolonged stay due to the weather making it impossible to reach Ithaca, Odysseus leaves the city with one more person than he entered it with, and Penelope sets sail towards Ithaca. With her luggage, a tapestry which is practically finished, but she still didn't feel quite confident about, so she didn't show anyone. When Odysseus leads his newly wedded into a freshly built palace and shows her their chamber, which, despite being at the heart of the building, is somehow filled with natural light, and at its center stood a large olive tree, filled in with white blossoms, and underneath it, between its roots, was a bed. Penelope took the room in, contemplating something. After a minute or so, she asked Odysseus to help her hang a tapestry, but to please not look at it while he did it. After it was hung up, she took a step back, examining it and declaring it done. It depicts a scene of a large olive tree. At its roots lie two foxes, curled up around each other, the smaller one somehow curling around the larger, offering it comfort and a place to rest. When Odysseus looked at it, he saw a depiction of his home. So, well, that's another fic done. That counter is now has now risen to, I think, three. Not entirely sure. Uh, Healer, Honey, this one, and I left the other one, Carpe Diem, on hiatus. Yeah, this is the third one. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. It's a bit shorter fic than the ones I usually do, but well, I myself wasn't really feeling like writing a larger one. And I think this has everything it should have. Um, yeah. There are some uh, kind of things in this chapter I would like to elaborate on. So first, the thing about Penelope disliking boar hunts is a reference to Portabello's road series, The Shepherd of the Peloponnese. Um, a story I really like on written on AF3. It's about the first meeting of Odysseus and Penelope. This in this story at Sparta, in which I think that it should be taking place there. Well, but when I meet there, they both find boar hunt stories so incredibly repetitive and boring. Um, Further, well, in this chapter, there's a kind of thing like, hey, two men came rushing to help Odysseus in the aftermath of the boar hunt. Father and king. Um, and I don't know where I read this, but well, I have heard before the secondary myth that Odysseus isn't really Laertes' son, but the son of Sisyphus. Um, and well, I tried to kind of get that duplicity from hey, whose son is Odysseus, and uh, in the story, is it also a rumor going around like Odysseus? Yeah, he has to be Sisyphus' son, like such a trickster. And is that just a story going around in this fictional world, which Odysseus quite finds hilarious and just takes advantage of, keeps kind of hinting at it, keeping people in doubt. Like, is he really? Like, he looks a lot like the king, but well, you see how he acts. Um, but who knows? Certainly not me. And why did I make Ithaca have enough of a population problem? Sorry about that. The dishwasher was done. So why did I fuck? What was I? Why did I make Ithaca have enough population problem? It was first supposed to be about Laertes talking about how the small nature of Ithaca made it so that the rulers couldn't avoid taking in the struggle of the common people, eternalizing all those problems they couldn't solve and breaking them. but I couldn't really make that work. So now Ithaca is nearly unreachable. I wonder if that will come into play somewhere along the line. And it also has a lot of issues. Um, well, that was all that. Again, I hope you enjoyed. Could be I stop doing these again, but if you have any recommendations of a fic I should could be the pod ficking, I would be open to that. Um, you know, continuing with this kind of regular schedule, which you know, on the third week I broke again. It's now Sunday. Oops. So I missed Saturday. Um, yeah. Uh, if you have any recommendations, I could do that. The shepherds of the Peloponnese. But in that case, I really should learn how to pronounce that word in English. By the way, English isn't my first language, and well, I can't really be doing my native language pronunciation, which would make it sound weird, and I don't like mixing the languages. Makes the line between them blurry. Now, if you don't speak two whole languages, that won't make sense to you. But well, I'm not going to give a lecture about the effects of knowing multiple languages and them kind of getting intertwined in your head, and you having a conversation and thinking, yeah, that is a good word for that term. And it's like, from, oh yeah, I have that word, but oh shit, it's not the language I'm speaking right now. Fuck, I don't know the English term. But yeah. Not that my English is really worse than my native tongue. I think on some niveaus it's like almost better, seeing as, well, I'm a bit too often on the internet, and if I'm on the internet, I'm speaking English and hearing English and not really hearing my native tongue. I also know a bit of Greek and Latin and German and French. One of those things you probably could uh, recognize from which country I am. I've got that language though. Um, yeah. Any recommendations? Please comment. Um, Probably not that many people going to listen that far. My view counts and watch time hours have not been as high for this fic as for my others. Like, if I look at my analytics, it's like, hey, 8 people watched the complete last video, and I look from, hey, how are my other series done, with which I haven't really done anything for the past almost a year. It's like, hey, 15 people watched that complete one. Okay, guess this one is really having traction. I guess it's a less popular fandom, and so I probably should end this, even though I would like to share a couple of other things, but well, community post, which no one will do, I guess. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one. See you next week. 5 months. I don't know.